Thank you, Jack. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's great to be here. Mark, I think you said you've been with the party since 2008?
Yes.
Okay. I have to say I'm not a member of the party, but in 2004, that was my guy. I'm probably the only one in the room that has this. And Mark, I'd like you to have this now. A little piece of memorabilia. As Jack said, I'm with the Florida 10th Amendment Center, and it's always a pleasure for us to congregate with folks that believe in freedom and personal liberty and share that commitment. The invitation, I noticed, said the 10th Amendment movement, and I emailed Jack. I said, well, it's the Florida 10th Amendment Center. And on the way here this morning, I said, you know, this has become a movement. It really has. And in retrospect, that wasn't really a misprint. And in the short time that we have here today, I want to share the history and activity of that movement. For those of you who may not be aware, the 10th Amendment Center was started by Michael Bolden in Los Angeles in 2006, actually started as an anti-war group, which basically we still are today. We only believe in wars that are declared by the Congress. We don't believe in spending blood and treasure to build empire. In November of 2009, they allowed me to start the Florida 10th Amendment Center. And since then, we've had 2 Nullify Now events, and our website and social media sites are visited by thousands of people every week. The National 10th Amendment Center site is visited literally by tens of thousands of people every day. And I would like to say that Mr. Keith Dunn with the JBS back there has been a participant in both of our Nullify Now events, and JBS has been a national sponsor of the tour, and we're real pleased about that. This past legislative session, thanks to the hard work of 2 liberty lobbyists, in fact, probably the only 2 in the state, John Holman and Paul Henry, the 10th Amendment Center Intrastate Commerce Act was actually a bill in the House and the Senate. Unfortunately, it died a quick and lonely death in its first committee, but we're going to come back with that this year. We're going to come back hard with that one and perhaps a few more if we can get some traction on it. And just as your party has core beliefs and a mission statement that holds you together, the 10th Amendment Center also has core beliefs that are rooted in liberty principles of the framers and the ratifiers. And I'd like to share those with you. First of all, rights are not granted to us by the government. They're ours by our very nature, by being children of God. They are our birthright. Government does not give us our rights. All just political authority is derived from the people. Government exists only with our consent. And we reserve the right to withdraw that consent. We, the people of the several states, created the federal government, not the other way around. And someday they will get that right. The 10th Amendment defines the total scope of federal power as being that which has been delegated by the people to the federal government in the Constitution, nothing more. The people of each state have the sole and exclusive right and power to govern themselves in all areas not delegated to the government. And when we say the government, we refer to the central government, the federal government, what has simply become now Leviathan. A government without limits is tyranny. And when Congress enacts laws and regulations that are not made in pursuance of the powers enumerated in the Constitution, the people are not bound to obey them. And thanks to the vision of Michael Bolden, the 10th Amendment Center, and its volunteers, or Tenters as we've become known, that was supposed to be a put-down, but we embrace that term. We're proud to be called Tenters. The discussion of sovereignty and the reimplementation of federalism as intended by the framers and the ratifiers, the discussion's been reignited. It's been brought to people who otherwise had never heard this stuff before. But still, there's far too many Americans that are unfamiliar with the principles of the Constitution, the 10th Amendment in particular, and they feel that they're just relics of a time gone by. They're not appropriate in today's America. And there's others that flatly deny the intentions of not only the 10th Amendment, the 9th Amendment, the 2nd Amendment, the 1st Amendment. Okay? For many of them, they feel the Constitution, as agreed to by the ratifiers, was left on the doorstep of Appomattox Courthouse. And we know that's not true. History, as recorded in the ratification debates of the several states, tells us differently. Writing in the pre-ratification Federalist 45, Madison said the powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. And the understanding of that union would be one of the sovereign states was expressed at the North Carolina Convention as follows: that each state in the Union shall respectively retain every power, jurisdiction, and right which is not by this Constitution delegated to the Congress of the United States or to the Department of the Federal Government. New York, yes, New York, ratified the Constitution with this understanding, that the powers of government may be reassumed by the people whensoever it shall become necessary to their happiness, that every power, jurisdiction, and right which is not by the said Constitution clearly delegated to the Congress of the United States or the departments of the government thereof remains to the people of the several states or to their respective state governments to whom they may have granted the same. That doesn't sound very cloudy. Massachusetts, yes, Massachusetts, New York, Massachusetts. Now, you know the image of them today. Massachusetts said first that it be explicitly declared that all powers not expressly delegated by the aforesaid Constitution are reserved to the several states to be by them exercised. And by reviewing what the states understood the Constitution to mean in their deliberations, whether or not to ratify, we can see that they understood the government they were creating to be its limited powers agent would in fact be limited in its powers. After all, why would 13 separate individual nation states, which is what the word state means, people say, no, they weren't separate countries, they was the United States of America. Well, if you read the Treaty of Paris that ended the war, what does it say? It says King George and the state of New York, state of Delaware, state of New Jersey. It doesn't say United States of America, period. It mentions every state separately. Why would these people go out and bring a war upon their countries just to reinstitute a powerful, oppressive central government? Doesn't make any sense. And if that was the case, then the Virginia plan, which was first presented at Philadelphia, would have been accepted, because what did it have? It had a lifetime executive, and it had a national legislature which could veto state legislatures. Why wouldn't they accept that if that's what they wanted? If that's what people today say should be the intent, then that would have been accepted, but it was not accepted. When I talk about this stuff, particularly at another party's clubs and meetings, when they ask me, they look at me like the traditional deer in the headlight. Like, you know, this stuff isn't true, you're making it up. No, I'm not making it up. I use a lot of quotes. That's, you know, I look down a lot, and I have a lot of papers. It's not that it's very long talk that I have, it's just I use 24 type because I can't see. As a matter of fact, speaking of other parties, I think there's another gentleman at Apopka, which is not too far from here, who's appearing in one of the other parties. I think his sole intention is just to split the vote between Mr. Good and Mr. Johnson. And I'm sure that he'll have a wonderful time saying things that none of us really believe. Thomas Jefferson's understanding of limited powers was this: I consider the foundation of the Constitution as laid on this ground, that all powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states or to the people. That's the text of the 10th Amendment. To take a single step beyond the boundaries thus specifically drawn around the powers of Congress is to take possession of a boundless field of power no longer susceptible to any definition. And here we are in 2012, and what Jefferson warned about is the boundless field of power, no longer susceptible to any definition, is a fact of life in today's America. What did Nancy Pelosi say when she was asked where in the Constitution do you get the power to enact national health care? And when she looked at the guy, she said, "Are you kidding? Are you kidding?" She repeated it several times. And this has come about in large part from three federal branches acting not so much as a check on each other, but as co-conspirators in an endless, incremental journey to expand their individual and collective power. The rightful remedy to contain the general government when it steps outside of its constitutional limits is, of course, nullification. And this word, too, like the simple construction of the 10th Amendment, is refuted by many of today's so-called scholars and media experts. And that, when I mention that word, heads roll, eyes roll, heads shake, smoke comes out of the audience. And from the Southern Poverty Law Center to the Heritage Foundation, nullification is demonized, distorted, marginalized, and rejected. The SPLC not only has 10th Amendment Center and the chapters on their watch list. We're on their watch list. Yeah, but they sent an undercover reporter to nullify Al Jacksonville last year. He was quickly outed. and was treated as well as any other guest. And then went back and wrote a report that did not mirror at all what happened at the convention. In May of 2011, Heritage's Matthew Spaulding wrote, "In another victory for the common sense and the Constitution, nullification has died a deserved death in North Dakota." He went on to say that loose talk claiming a state's independent authority to declare federal law null and void at will not only confuses the situation, but also undermines our constitutional credibility. Well, number one, the states don't undermine or refuse any federal law, just the ones that are outside the Constitution. And number two, my question would be, is it more credible to allow unconstitutional acts to stand? Is that a better choice to make? On February 22nd, 2012, this time an article by Mike Kelsey, Heritage stated, "Nullification may appear to offer a tempting silver bullet solution to the overexpansion of the federal government, but it is imperative that legislators reject this unconstitutional and unlawful doctrine." Wow. And Mike Meharry, who's our National Communications Director, he very simply said, "I understand where the folks at Heritage are coming from. Nullification doesn't fit in with their Hamilton to Lincoln view of the United States." And that's it in a nutshell for those guys. As far as the establishment is concerned, our supreme overlords in Washington can do what they please, and if it isn't forbidden by the courts, we just have to suck it up. For us in Florida, though, if it was only Heritage that held this view, it wouldn't be so bad. After all, in the new revolution, people don't really care. Students of Liberty are not concerned so much what Heritage Foundation thinks about nullification. But ALEC, the American Legislative Executive Council, which has great influence in Tallahassee, is also an opponent of nullification, and they have a lot of influence. Now, if Jefferson and Madison's rightful remedy was wielded against federal usurpation on a routine basis, think about the lack of influence organizations like ALEC would have. So it's in their vested interest to oppose the state's right to determine what is constitutional and what isn't.